They talk about prana and chi, and it's both the same thing. So what is prana and what is chi in modern parlance? If you look at society today worldwide, there's a big drive on switching to electricity to get away from fossil fuels. Humanity thinks that electricity is the future. Now, esoterically speaking, the father is electricity and the mother is magnetism. When electricity is still, there's only potential. When it starts to move, a magnetic field is formed. When the electrons start to move, a magnetic field is formed. So, symbolically speaking, the masculine principle, electric, existed first. Imagine it as a dot, if you will, just a point. And when it starts to move, an electronic field is formed. And that could be visualized as a circle. In the center of the circle is the point. They call that the monad. If you imagine electricity as a straight line, it's very, like direct energy, the masculine principle. Males tend to be very direct. Females are rounded. If you look at your electronic equipment, it has a on switch to turn it on, and you have a straight line piercing the circle, turning it on, turning the light on. Electromagnetism, when it crosses over at the dialectic or the pinch point, light is formed, and that light is the light of consciousness. Now, the Bible, people read the Bible, they read the book of Genesis, and they understand the beginning of everything. When was the universe formed and all the rest of it. But these are concepts with emphasis on the con. Because the Bible only makes sense when you've raised the energy. And that energy is electromagnetism. And when it goes through the body, up the spine, it crosses over at various points in the body, loosely related to the endocrine system, the 7 glands of the endocrine system. Now, it's not the glands specifically, it's the energy that's in those glands, or the potential, and that each gland lights up, and that's spoken about in the book of Revelation. It's the 7 seals of Revelation, and it's opened by the rising of the sacred secretion and the kundalini. But first, the kundalini, that's the energy. You're moving the energy for the lower regions of the body up into the Garden of Eden, which is your brain, and that's called, symbolically speaking, the enlightenment. Ment means mind, the enlightened mind. So now the individual that has had that internal physiological experience now has knowledge of good and evil. Good being higher cognitive function, higher consciousness, heaven. And evil being low consciousness, Satan, meaning the opponent of higher consciousness. So now the individual is at the point of Genesis, or in Hebrew, Bereshit, in the beginning. So now the journey starts. Doesn't start before that. That's the start point. Then the book starts to make sense, but not in the detail. Remember, the devil's in the detail. That's what religious is fucking terribly guilty of. Fucking nonsensical nonsense. So now you've got knowledge of good and evil. What now? The Apostle Paul was on the road to Damascus with his mates, so he wasn't walking alone. So if you visualize the scene, he's on the road to Damascus, and that area in the Middle East is dusty, barren land, Syria. And he's with his mates, so he's not on his own, he's not an individual. So it's a wide path. And Damascus, as it stands, is the oldest inhabited city on earth. It's been continuously inhabited. Now, if you turn that inwards, you'll understand that Damascus is symbolic of the brain in a low state of consciousness, because it says that Damascus will ultimately be laid to ruins. It will be destroyed. Now, whilst on that path, the Apostle Paul, according to the story, it's symbolic, it's allegory, a metaphor. He met Jesus, and Jesus appeared to him, and there was flashing lights and things, and Jesus said, Saul, Saul. Now Saul is his Hebrew name, because he was a failed Pharisee. And his name was Paul, because he was also a Roman. And in ancient Hebrew, Saul is Shaul. In ancient Hebrew, they didn't use vowels, so his name was spelt the same way you spell Sheol. And Sheol is the Hebrew version of hell. It's basically indicative of low consciousness. And Paulos in Greek means lowly and little. And Shaul means question him. So the person that has raised the energy will recognize that their ego intellect in a low state of consciousness is not their friend. So they will question their own intellect. They won't believe what it's telling them. You see? The character Jesus said, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? So when you understand that Jesus is symbolic of higher consciousness, or the intercedary, it's the sacred secretion. And when that sacred secretion is protected and it's risen, it intercedes, that higher consciousness intercedes on Paul's behalf. Paul being the normal state of human consciousness at present. Now Paul had his head cut off, which is symbolic of the death of the old ego, the death of the story that you tell yourself. It gets cast off. Because you recognize it, it's just a story. Like in the film, The Wizard of Oz. Ignore the man behind the curtain. The Wizard of Oz is about the narrow, the path, the journey. To find courage and heart, strength. And Dorothy was guided by a dog, Toto. And dog backwards is God. It's all a symbolic story. The tornado is symbolic of the Kundalini. But it would only make sense to people that have had the experience. So who has, because am I fortunate? I don't know. It was kind of spontaneous with me. I understood some parts of it, like clean your house. Stop eating dead flesh, don't drink. So I responded to that. And then things started happening. There's more things that happen that I don't care to explain here. Not that it's a secret, it's just individual to me. And everybody has their own individual experiences. And the experience will be individual to you. And it will be unexplainable by and large. Can't be defined with words. So basically, Damascus would be symbolic of the brain in a state of low consciousness. the combination of chi or prana is electricity. And you use that electricity, you store it up in the body. So you temper yourself. You're not reacting to things that are happening outside you, because when you're reacting emotionally, you're expending that energy. Emotion, energy in motion. You're burning it off on nonsense. So basically, you are charging yourself up. And you're eating the right foods. If you start researching positive prana foods, if you look at the Ayurvedic diet, and there's lots of fruits, herbs. We all remember from our childhood, in the science lessons, when you stick a couple of electrodes into a lemon, it lights a bulb up, a small light bulb. So we understand that a lemon, a fruit, has electricity in it. So if we was to import that, ingest that into our bodies, because we are what we eat, shit in, shit out, high energy in, there you go. It's a simple equation. So the body has become alkaline. And the Jesus said as well, be salty. So you're taking salt with that. Now, salt makes water a good conductor. A large percentage of your body is water. And if you have salt in that water, it makes it conduct electricity a lot better. And it's good for the nervous system. Any excess salt is excreted in the urine. Obviously, don't eat tablespoons of it. Your fucking kidneys will look like prunes and you'll be in hospital. Like with anything, be sensible. Put it on the palm of your hand and lick it from the palm of your hand. When it tastes bad, don't take any more. Your body's telling you something. Don't use table salt, that white stuff. It's got a filler in it. It's a chemical compound. It stops it from clumping together. Use natural salts as best you can. Himalayan rock salt is popular. It's also got rock minerals in it, which isn't bad for you. And some minerals are lacking from the modern human diet. Digestion uses a lot of energy. So eat light. Eat once. When the sun's up, around about midday. These are the things that I'll be practicing myself. These are realizations that I'm having and I will be putting into effect. Exercising. When I was in the army, there was these signs down in Vogelzang where we used to go training. And it was mens sano in corpore sano, and I think it means something like fit body, fit mind. So we used to run up and down the hills. I always enjoyed the training now, I just didn't enjoy the running. Never did. It's anaerobic. It means your body is burning more oxygen than your lungs can supply. So the inevitable onset of acidosis, which cramping muscles or muscle aches, it's the buildup of lactic acid in the muscles. Now you should be exercising gently, not getting too out of breath. Just a nice steady state of exercise. A good walk. Raise the heart rate somewhat. A gentle jog. Nothing strenuous. You should be able to feel it in your cardiovascular system, but not in your muscles. They shouldn't ache. You should know that you've used them, but they shouldn't feel that they've been punished. And that way you're not in deficit. The body is able to meet the demands of the physical activity. And of course, the body will react over time, and its performance will improve. So in time, your physical output can increase. That's what they call fitness. Well, actually, fitness is recovery rates. But you don't want to be going into the regions of having too much output and not enough oxygen, because that puts acid into the body. You don't want it there. Deep breathing. There's a guy called Wim Hof. I'm sure you're aware of him. He talks about these things. Now, there's a passage in the Bible, or a couple of passages, where it alludes to where God says, "You stick your tongues out and you mock me." So that's symbolic of people talking, not being silent. And the other one, it says, they wink their eye. Now, the eye it's talking about is the pineal gland. Now, Wim Hof's methods work. You oxygenate the blood, then you stop breathing. And because you've stopped breathing, the mind goes quiet. And you take a dip, it's like dipping your little toe into the unified field, into the field of pure consciousness. But you're only there for a little bit. It's like your pineal gland just winks its eye. And it's funny as well, because the Apostle Paul says, we will all be changed in the blink of an eye. But God doesn't like being winked at. Do you see where I'm going with this? It's going to take more than a wink. Now, what happens in your brain over your lifetime is that you have patterns of behavior. You have set programs in the form of belief systems, cultural and societal shite that you've inherited, and you do them without recognizing what you're doing. Even somebody who claimed to be fully conscious is not fully conscious of what they're doing, saying, or thinking. Try and do it. It's almost impossible, because the neural pathways, they've been trodden. In fact, imagine the brain as a cornfield, but these neural pathways have been trodden so often that they've become well-beaten paths. So to build a new path will take a huge mental effort. And this is what causes people to stumble. Now, the character Jesus said, call nobody your father, because your father is in heaven. Okay, so your father is higher consciousness in heaven, which is the unified field. Call it whatever you want. The universe, if you will. So you're a child of the universe. But the Apostle Paul says, he basically said, I speak on behalf of the Spirit, and I am your father. That's a bit of a red flag, people. So you've got the universe on one side, and you've got the Apostle Paul, symbolic of humans' egoic state of low consciousness, which enforces the illusion of separation. So how do you overcome that illusion? When a child is born, its neural pathways have not been well trodden. Its brain's like a blank canvas. It doesn't judge. It doesn't know. It hasn't even learnt what fear is. It learns that later. Your parents teach fear. Your siblings teach fear. School teaches fear. Society teaches fear. Religion teaches fear. And humanity is in a perpetual state of fear, whether they recognize it or not. Now, there is a thing called EMPCO. That's electromagnetic pulse changeover. And it's where you can look it up. It's EMPCO, EMPCO. Look it up on YouTube. And it's where the Earth's magnetic field basically collapses to the point where plasma discharges can occur and electrical storms, the type that will carve out the Grand Canyon in little more than a few minutes. The Colorado didn't do that in millions of years, and to believe that, it's just an utter settled science nonsense. Mountain ranges formed within minutes. So that's what happens on this planet. And it happens, it's cyclical. And it's happened before and it's going to happen again. Like, who built the pyramids? Our past. We don't know anything up until about 6,000 years ago. The birth of civilization, they say, in Sumeria or Babylon. It was as if prior to that time humans had existed, but everything they'd built was wiped out, like the stories of Atlantis. It was all wiped out. The slate was cleaned. The big reset. But back to the individual. How does the individual reset their own brain? That's where that prana and chi comes in. See, you store up that energy. And the character Jesus said, take no thought for your body. Take no thought for your life. Okay. So he's basically saying going to a state of lockdown, social isolation. The ancient yogis call this brahmacharya, which is a form of devotion to higher, or if you will, self-love. And the Apostle Paul said they become lovers of self. And COVID means divine presence. Do you see where I'm going with this? So the individual would decide to go into a personal internal lockdown where they would maintain the best they could a meditative state. Now, the individuals that would do this are the ones that have had the Kundalini experience. Those that haven't had it, you can go for it. I don't see what harm it would do. When Noah went on the ark, which is symbolic of meditation, going within, it was God, higher consciousness, that shut the door. It wasn't Noah. So those that haven't had the Kundalini, their door wouldn't get shut. They would always end up back where they started, that frustrating cycle of not getting anywhere. That's why it's important to clean your house and meditate, to find the balance where you can correct the energy in the body so at least it starts to flow properly. And it takes time. And in time, you may or may not have the Kundalini. I'm not promising anything. God sorts the people out. God is the brain. So your own brain, when it is in the right state, things will happen. If it's not in the right state, it won't happen. So this is where the individual has to do self-inquiry. And a lot of it is about self-inquiry. Because that's where you tap into your intuition and it will guide you accordingly. Because your higher consciousness is there. Because if it wasn't, you wouldn't be here. But it's no good just winking at the universe, then sticking your tongue out. I am fully aware of that. Jesus would cure people and he would say to them, don't tell anybody. And then they'd run off and tell everyone. I'm guilty of that. So you store energy up. You take time out from the world. You walk away from it. You go wherever. You do whatever you have to do. And you lock down. You distance yourself. Isolate. You withdraw. You go within. Now they're trying to stop the spread of COVID, the divine presence. You can all feel it. You wouldn't be listening to me if you couldn't. When there's enough energy in the body, it will go into your brain and all those well-trodden paths will be eradicated. Boom, gone. That's ego death. But you don't die. Remember? Who said you would die? But on that day you will die. Who said you will die? Because you will not die. Because on that day you will have knowledge of good and evil. And you will be like God. Jesus said, you are gods. And there are stories in Tibet and in India of people disappearing into the jungles or disappearing into caves and doing this. But the cave you want to get into is what they call Brahma's cave. This story is reflected also in the Quran, where the Prophet Muhammad went into a cave and the spirit kicked the fuck out of him. And he was terrified. And he thought he'd lost everything. And he barely got out alive. And then his wife consoled him and looked after him. And the story is, of course, it's about the ego fighting with God. And God wins. And then God sends the Comforter, which is the subconscious mind, which then looks after Muhammad. It's the same story, but people don't understand the allegory. The same thing was reflected with Jacob. He climbed the mountain and wrestled with God. And God put his hip out. You know, it's the same story, different names. And Jesus said, for those that overcome, I will, when I leave you, I will send the Comforter, which is the Mother, the Holy Spirit. The Ruach Kodesh, which is Hebrew. It means the set apart spirit, because your subconscious is set apart. And it's to go into a state where you would just sit and go within. And then your own higher consciousness or the universe would shut the door to the outside world. And all that energy would shoot up your spine into your Garden of Eden, light up your pineal gland. And there would be a massive electrical or plasma discharge in your brain, which resets your brain. And then you are one with the universe. I and the Father are one. That's what it's about. So the enlightenment itself, knowing these things, that's halfway house. And it's a narrow path, you see. And only one individual can fit on a narrow path. It's not a ging-gang-gooly with your mates. Now, the old brain and all the neural pathways, the well-trodden ones, that gets destroyed. And New Jerusalem descends from heaven. Jerusalem in ancient Hebrew, Yerushalayim, which means the source of light, descends from heaven. A new brain. A new temple. Remember Jesus said, I will rebuild this temple in 3 days? He spoke of the rebellious generation. That's you people. You're rebellious. You don't believe the shit that we're being fed. You're rebelling against it. And everyone's telling you to, everything screams, oh, be obedient, be obedient. But you're rebelling against it. Don't bother rebelling to the Babylonian world. Ignore that. You need to rebel against the voice in your head. That's the deception. People are talking about the great deception. Oh, it's going to be aliens, or it's going to be this, or it's going to be that. There's all sorts of fucking nonsense. The deception is the voice in your head. It's the ego. It's the Apostle Paul. Low consciousness. So basically, when you clean your house and you've got an alkaline body, you're charging it up with prana by eating the right foods. And you're not being distracted by anything external to you. And you go into a state of equity, balance, and silence. And then the door gets shut. And then your brain gets a big fucking zap. And then you become Emmanuel, which means God is with us. So then you become a direct conduit from the universe consciousness to this plane of existence. That's a big deal. That's why many of the monks or the old yogis would disappear into the jungles. They decided to let humanity do what it does until the time is up, or until the time comes when the universe decides enough's enough.